How do I deal with living with my in-laws who appear to be religious on the outside, but are abusive towards me while my husband doesn't support me? So, I think my first response to that would be any kind of abusive relationship, whether it's from in-laws, whether it's from a husband, whether it's from any angle. I think it's really important to have the self-respect and self-worth to know that it's not okay to have to deal with abuse. And now obviously it's not necessarily always necessarily a one-way thing. It could just be that you personalities clash and you just don't get on. But if it is where it is predominantly something that is unprovoked and is not something that you can necessarily do anything about, then it's not necessarily healthy to be in that position.
I think the difficulty comes when you have a husband and wife where you don't act as a team. Because if you're a team, if you're a strong unit, then your husband or wife should be able to stand up for you against their in-laws, against their own parents and your in-laws. And unfortunately, I think this is what doesn't happen very often at all. I think you get the situation where, for example, the mother-in-law is being very abusive to the daughter-in-law, and the son or the husband is just stuck between two very strong personalities, and they don't feel strong enough to deal with that. And I feel that that's the sort of situation that tends to happen a lot more in introduction marriages and arranged marriages, where the two of you haven't had time to build yourself into a strong team. So then the daughter-in-law may be living in a house where she just doesn't feel like she's ever actually been welcomed in the first place. And that's a very difficult situation to be in. I think for me, the difficulty comes where you have to then make a decision as to at what point is enough. At what point do you say enough is enough? And I think people can tolerate a lot more than they think they can, but we have to start learning that we first have to deal with our own relationships and with ourselves. We have to deal with our emotions. What tends to happen more often than that is that you are trying to constantly change the other person. So you're trying to change your husband because he's not standing up for you. You're trying to change your mother-in-law because she's constantly having a go at you. And the reality is that you have to reach a point where you realize that I can't change other people. The conflict comes from the fact that you're always trying to change the other person, and maybe at some point you just need to realize that that person's not going to change. Now the question comes, can I deal with this? Can I now change myself as a person? One of the most important lessons that I always try and teach is that I can't change another person, but my response is my responsibility. I can't decide how you're going to be, but I can decide how I'm going to react to you. So you have to find a way to say that I've done all that I can. I've changed myself a person. I've tried to accept the situation as I can. I've tried to make changes in every way possible. And once you've exhausted all of those means, that's the point at which you just have to ask yourself, is this too much? Do I need to just step away from this?
Yeah, and maybe this is not healthy for me. It's not good for me anymore. And
that's the key word, is that at what point does this become unhealthy for me?